Hey everybody, welcome back. Today we're doing another Chronos video. This one's a bit interesting. This test will actually be a complete waste of time, or it could be really valuable information. Back when the Chronos was around 0.50 and needed updated, I decided to keep the original microSD card and clone it to another microSD card and just use that and have the original as a backup. But then I realized something when I switched microSD cards. I noticed that the camera boot faster. Now, if it's one thing I know right off the bat is that there is a limitation when it comes to the standard SD cards that are used with the camera when saving footage, and that they don't go extremely fast to like a V90. I know they're like somewhere maybe like at a V30 or V60. Don't quote me on that. I just know that they can't reach the full speed of some faster SD cards. But knowing how technology works, there is a speed cap. Which means that, at one point it'll just, cap out of how fast it can go. I was wondering if there was a certain class of microSD card that you could use to boot the camera and use some of the functions faster. The way I look at these microSD cards that boot the camera software are kind of just like SSDs in a computer. In that some of them, even though they're all SSDs, some of them will run and perform better and faster. So what I've done is I've purchased 5 different SanDisk microSD cards, put the Chronos 0.71 update on them. So we're going to do a few things with this. First, we're going to swap out each microSD card, boot up the camera, and see if that boot animation is faster or slower, depending on the card. And then what we're also going to do is we're going to do a full RAM save and see if the speed differs between the cards as well. I should mention for the saving speed test as well, it's going to be done on the same SSD, the same cable, and it's also going to be the same thing, which is a 5.5 second recording of the white screen behind me, just to keep everything as consistent as possible. So I'm just going to make I'm just going to give my quick startup lineup of how fast and slow I think they're going to go, as well as my predictions. So right off the bat, we have this Ultra microSD UHS-1 card. I predict that this is going to be the slowest because it's the slowest card. So my prediction is this is the slowest one. And then for the fastest, I'm going to go with the Extreme Pro. I think that's going to be the fastest. But what I also said before is I feel like it might cap out somewhere speed-wise. So I feel like just the regular Extreme is where it'll be capped out at. So these two will perform very, very similarly. And then I have a high endurance card, and then, I have a Ultra A1 listen, I have to be honest about this too. I was very excited about this, but then I honestly I couldn't tell you the difference between these micro SD cards. The normal SanDisk SD cards, I swear, very understanding what's different about them. The micro SD card versions, I like the Extreme and the Extreme Pro here. The only difference is, looking at the package, you would have no idea, but on the back, the Extreme Pro writes up to 90, does a write speed of 90, and the Extreme does a write speed of 60. I wouldn't know that. The endurance tells you that though, right on the front. See, it tells you right there. You can't see that, but it writes up to 40. So for what I understand, it literally goes normal, 20, 40, 60, 80. Or no, it goes normal, 20, 40, 60, 90. When it comes to write speed. Read speed, they're all the same. I think there should be a difference, but those are just my quick predictions. We're going to start off with the slowest card, and then we're going to move our way up. All right, this is test 1. I might actually end up turning off this light, so depending on how bad the glare is, or I might just, So if you notice that, that's the only thing changing. So this is with the slowest card. This is with the, this is with this one for comparison. I should mention too, from what I understand, this is the slowest card. Especially these first two. Besides the speed up to 120, these two cards are very similar, it seems like, spec-wise. But with the lowest spec one, this is a SanDisk Ultra, the first one. And the timer begins now. That's the logo speed. And there we go. That's when the timer will stop. So you'll have to forgive me. I didn't do a stopwatch there, but that'll be that time. I'll put it up on the screen. To make this test more consistent as well, I'm going to do 2 boots per each card. That first boot, just, you know, so everything registers. And I'm going to turn it off, turn it back on, and do the second boot. So that way everything is already there. So that was boot number 1. Let's go to boot number 2. Boot number 2 is probably the one I'll be using for reference, just because the first boot's always the slowest, but then once the card's in, you're just gonna, you know, turn on the camera normally every time. So boot number 2 is what we're gonna go off of for each card. Here we go. 3, 2, 1. Wait for it. Now it's ready to record. All right. So that was about 45 seconds. I'll have the exact time somewhere. Harrison, put it up here. That makes sense, right? I'm starting to wonder if I have deja vu or if this actually is a thing that's going to work. But now we're going to plug in our SSD and we're just going to do save test. I guess to make things easier for next time too, I had an F8. I'll just turn this up. So when you see essentially the background, you'll know that the camera's fully turned on. Though you can tell. Just make it visually easier. So now we're going to record. Literally nothing. That's completely fine with me. And just to keep things consistent, I'm just going to do... H.264 is always quick. So I'm just going to do a Cinema DNG RAW. Let me get my timer ready. Full save. 3, 2, 1. And we're off. I know how long this usually takes, so I'm just going to let the camera sit and go get some food. Alright. On my clock, that was about 6 minutes and 24 seconds. I feel like that's pretty standard, actually. Alright, so now we're going to turn off the camera, put another card in, and repeat the process. Alright, so up next is the darker gray SanDisk Ultra, up to 120 speed. So we'll see how this one does. Theoretically, it should be faster, but we won't know till we find out. So 2 boots. Here's the first boot. Let me get the official stopwatch ready. 3, 2, 1. And okay, see, this is what I'm talking about. Though that may have looked similar to the human eye, I got that about 1.5 seconds faster. Now that was the first boot up, so I'll turn it off and turn it on again and we'll see how it compares. But that was, for the first boot, a little bit faster. Here we go, boot 2. That was about the same time. Our 5 seconds starts now. Well, 5 seconds of saving. You know what I mean. All right. If I'm not mistaken, that is literally the same exact time as the first card. Which, don't get me wrong, I expected these 2 first cards to perform exactly the same. The one where things start to get interesting, our next card. So the next card I have is the SanDisk High Endurance card. And this is the first time we actually see like a bigger jump in our performance from an extra 20 megabytes. Also, this seems to be made for like running stuff all day. So I'm wondering if this might potentially actually be a better, longer lasting card, like if you were recording with this like nonstop all day. That's for another test, and honestly, I highly doubt it. But at the moment, we're just seeing if it boots faster. This is the High Endurance. 3, 2, 1. Come on. Okay. That was about the same as the last one, it seemed like. But to be sure, we'll do a second boot. Boot cycle number 2. 3, 2, 1. Alright, that was literally identical to the first one. Now that we got that, we're going to do the record for a 5-second test. Maybe this will prove slightly more efficient. All right, here we go. 3, 2, 1. All right, so at the moment, what I've learned, these kind of seem all very consistent, and post me will know that better, as well as you guys. But we're gonna do the other 2 cards just because. Next on the list is the Extreme, not to be confused with the Extreme Pro. This is the one before it. So, this is the golder looking one. Let me pull up my handy dandy stopwatch. All right, 3, 2, 1. All right. Ow, there's a case there. Test number 2. In 3, 2, 1. All right. Just from eyeballing and stopwatching, the Extreme seems to be the fastest at 1 second faster. So maybe there is something behind this. We're going to start this at the same time. 3, 2, 1. All right. That also surprisingly seemed kind of the fastest. All right, time to do the last card. All right, this is the last card. This is the Extreme Pro. This theoretically is the fastest one. But we'll see. If anything tells us anything so far is, well, you know what'll happen. It'll take around 45 seconds. So here we go. First boot up. 3, 2, 1. Come on, I have faith. Okay, that was time numero uno. Give it a few seconds, we'll turn it off. All right, try number 2. 3, 2, 1. All right, now let's do the save test. 3, 2, 1. All right, let's move on to the final results. All right, so what we learned is that though this may seem like a waste of time, there's actually some value to this experiment. This is where it starts to sound like a science fair project. In conclusion, we found out if you have any of the standard SanDisk micro SD cards, you'll get the same performance. Now this is good and a little disappointing. The reason why this is good is if you get a consumer grade micro SD card, your performance should be the same across the board just from turning on the camera and saving. But the reason why I kind of see this as a bad thing is that there's no room for improvement. Now don't get me wrong, just like the SSD speed test, if you use something like a Samsung versus some generic company that doesn't really exist, I would hope in some way that the Samsung would do better. And from what we learned from that is the generic ones just flopped across the board. They performed the worst when it came to saving speed. I do have a theory in that if you use or find some very off-brand generic micro SD card, you'll experience the same type of performance where it'll take longer to turn on the camera, or even in some cases might save slower. But when it comes across name brand stuff such as, you know, SanDisk, Samsung, and Kingston, I wouldn't be surprised if they all performed exactly the same just as they did in the SSD test. But we did learn from this that if you have a name brand micro SD card, then you're probably good and you don't need to change it. Hopefully you enjoyed this video and hopefully it was somewhat informative. But until then, I'll see you in the next video. It's not going to be another vacation video, I promise that. It's going to be a wedding video. No, it's not.